Hi, good morning to everyone. I hope you all are having a great morning. Yeah, thank you, Unku. Good morning to you as well. Wow, that's nice. I can see everyone is like so cheerful. Good morning. Thank you to all of y'all, all those who have been responding in the chats. I'm just going to give like 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes for all those who have registered to start coming in. But while then, yes, I hope you've had your breakfast. I'm a breakfast person, so I hope you have had your breakfast or at least a cup of coffee. And today we are on Thursday. Thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate that. So um, we are almost technically about 1.5 more days till we start the weekend. So yeah, I'm sure all of y'all are looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. We're just going to give a couple of minutes, not a couple, maybe just another minute actually, so we can start the session for today. Good morning to everyone. Okay, so we have slightly less than a minute till we get all those who have registered to join in, and then we're going to go right into the topic. It's an interesting and an important topic. Yeah, so the time now is 11:03, and I'm going to start. Yeah, before I move on behalf of Naluri, I would like to welcome you for today's webinar session, which is the title of the webinar is on shining a light on suicide prevention. I'm Alison, and I'm going to be spending the next about an hour. So the session should take about 45 minutes, and we will probably have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. Yeah. Later, I will be giving a short introduction about myself. But before that, thank you for joining us on this webinar. And we look forward to seeing you more often. We have a series of webinars going on. Please feel free to visit our website and stay tuned for more webinars. Yeah. So as I move on, before we start on the topic itself, I would just like to go through a couple of housekeeping rules. They're just something for us to take note of. So feel free to ask me questions. You can actually just type my name and listen there before asking me questions. Or if you choose to ask some private questions, and if you don't want them to appear on the chat, you can actually just send me on a private message, and I will address these questions at the end of my session. Yeah, and also there will be handouts available, so to download, and you will be able to like go through some of the reading material. And if you'd like to have a chat with us, and then you can ask us questions pertaining to this topic. Yeah, so that's basically some of the ground rules. Apart from that, I really hope that all of us can keep this session a little bit more lively and interactive. Feel free to answer questions, drop me feedback, statements as we move along in this topic. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. My name is Alison, and I am a digital mental health coach with Naluri. I'm also a registered counselor with Lembaga Counselling Malaysia. My background is in counselling. My master's is in counselling, and my bachelor's is in psychology. So I do give a lot of mental health related talks. Mainly is in terms of stress management, depression, work environment management, self-care. And of course, I do have a background for the last 7 years in career counseling, working with previously with a university. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about in terms of the background. So with regards to the topic for today, it's going to be talking about something a little bit more sensitive. So the topic is going to focus a lot more on suicide. How is that impacting us in Southeast Asia? And of course, also how can we look out for risk, warning signs, and then prevention? So it is a slightly sensitive topic. So this topic may not be suitable for children. So I really hope that for those of us who are logging in, we are taking this a little bit more seriously. Yeah. So a little bit of context in terms of what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of today's session. Of course, the first part would be covering in terms of what suicide is, the definitions, and what are some of the statistics. What is going on in our country? How serious is the rate of suicide here? And of course, then we're going to be exploring some of the myths and facts about suicide. And I'll be talking about risk factors. I'll be talking about how you can actually pick up warning signs. And before I end, I will definitely be addressing some of the ways that we, as common people, can start doing to help prevent suicide. So this is just a framework of how the whole entire session is going to continue. Yeah. So an introduction to suicide. So before I do that, I would just like to ask you if you may just type in the chat box, when you hear the word suicide, what do you think comes to mind? So if you're tuning in with me, don't worry, there's no right or wrong answer. This is just an interactive session. We are on a discussion. Um, thank you so much, Wai Shiyan. Thank you for joining me today as well. Um, yeah, so what comes to mind when you hear the word suicide? Yeah, no hope. I see a lot of you all are responding. Thank you so much. So a lot of you mentioned interesting words like hopelessness, life is meaningless. Yeah, when an individual wants to hurt themselves, depression, they really want to stop a pain. That's right. Someone who wants to end their own life, inability to cope up, that's good. Loss of hope, feeling alone, that's important. Unable to find a positive outlook of their situation, precisely, and can't handle stress, they feel alone. Thank you. Please do keep the answers coming in. And thank you so much to all of you who are engaging with me in this session. They want to find a way out, isn't it? They can't solve the problem. It feels like it's getting more and more overwhelming. Um, Noises that can't be shut out. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So we will be addressing, and a lot of y'all have spoken on various topics that we will be focusing on. We'll be diving right into it in a bit. But thank you, because most of y'all were able to, I think, identify and sort of see the keywords that is connected when someone talks about suicide. So we're just going to look at um, the definitions by WHO as well. It says that there is a death that is caused by injuring someone's life, and when there is an intention to die. Yeah, I think the key word to focus on is the injury and also that intention part. So a suicide attempt is when someone harms themselves with any intent to end their life. Yeah. But what's even more alarming, and I'd like you to pay attention to, is that it stats by WHO also shows that there are more than 700,000 people who die to suicide every year. Yeah. And what it says is that there is one death in every 40 seconds. Can you imagine that? Like, even if, as I'm talking right now, like less than a minute, there's someone actually at risk of taking their life. And that is how serious the topic is for today. Yeah. I see a reply from Anis. Yeah. People around fail to see that we're struggling, even label us as slaves. So the stigma, the labeling that comes with it, and when there's no hope, when you feel like you're being misunderstood, definitely that has an impact. Thank you for sharing that, Anis. So a little bit more in terms of the statistics, and this is just to help us understand or roughly give us a picture on how serious this issue is and how it is actually on the rise. So if you look at it, right, today's suicide, especially in teenagers, I like to call them children, but yeah, teenagers from the age of 15 to 29 years old. This is the fourth leading cause of death, which is alarming. And if you see that, stats also show that there is about 77% of those who actually go through suicide are those who are from the low and the middle income countries. Yeah. So you also see that, there is an increase. If you look at Singapore, the statistics show that there is a number of suicides in Singapore that has increased by 25.9%. And I'm very sure if you look at the statistics, pre-COVID and post-COVID, COVID is one of the factors that definitely has caused an increase, a significant increase in the numbers of people who are attempting or committing suicide at least. Yeah. So suicide myths versus facts. So we're just going to do a short, quick activity. And what I invite you to do is, right, I would actually encourage you to just type in the chat box. I'm going to go through statements. There are only about 6 statements. And as I read the statements, all I need you to do is to type, do you think it's a myth or a fact? So you have 2 choices. You just type myth or fact. Yeah. So we're just going to explore our thoughts about suicide. Yeah. So the first one, I'm just going to repeat that. You just need to type as I read. You can just type it out together. The first one is, talking about suicide increases the chance a person will act on it. Yeah. So I'm just going to read that once again. Talking about suicide increases the chance a person will act on it. Thank you so much to all those of you who are responding. Yeah, you just go ahead and do that. You can type a myth or a fact. Okay, I'm just going to give a few more seconds for those who are typing, for those who are responding, and I really appreciate all your response. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So if we look back at that sentence, right, talking about suicide itself, does it increase a chance that a person will act on it? So the idea is that it is actually a myth. And the reason being is because even in my own experience of meeting with clients for therapy, for counseling, I noticed that one of the key indicators for why an individual actually goes to that point, either to attempt suicide or to actually commit suicide, is because they feel very lonely. And that's what some of you actually shared earlier as you were typing out what does suicide mean to you. So what it means is that basically when when an individual who has an intention start to talk about it, it actually kind of like helps them to understand that there is somebody there who's willing to listen to them. Yeah. So now we're going to go to the second sentence, which is, suicide can be prevented. Yeah. Suicide can be prevented. So you just need to type, is it a myth or is it a fact? Thank you so much for all those of you who are replying. Okay, I'm just waiting for a couple of seconds for those of you who are responding. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so suicide can definitely be prevented. And actually, towards the end of my presentation today, I will be sharing with you some of the things that we can start doing as individuals to help the people around us, to keep them safe and to help prevent suicide. Yeah. So I'm going to go to the third sentence, which is, suicide occurs with some warning. Suicide occurs with some warning. So what are your thoughts about it? Is it a fact or is it a myth? Yeah, I can see most of you have been sharing that it is a fact. Yeah, must sometimes, yes, if it's depression, very subtle signs, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, and for that statement, suicide occurs with some warning, it is actually a fact because there would be some indication. And actually, in a bit, we're going to be exploring some of these warning signs that is displayed. It could be that they were warning signs, but maybe before this, we didn't even know that those are signals that we were supposed to look into, or those are probably warning signs that an individual is at least having the ideation, the idea that, oh, I'm actually thinking of suicide. Yeah. So in number four, yeah, yes, yeah, we will be learning. Thank you so much, Chinya. We will be learning about how can we'll have a discussion on how can we identify these signals. Yeah. So now we are moving on to number four, which is um, people who take their own lives are selfish, cowards, or weak. Do you think it's a myth or a fact? Okay, so I see some of y'all uh, typing, some of y'all feel it's a myth, some of y'all have mixed answers. Thank you so much for sharing that. So it's a fact or a myth. Okay, so I'm just going to go through it. So, people who take their own lives are selfish, cowards, or weak, and this is actually a myth. The reason being is because most of the times, even when we talk to an individual who have been thinking about suicide, it's because they feel there is no hope and they feel they're becoming a burden to the family members or to the people who they love. And it also is a very brave act for them to actually try it out or even eventually do it. Yeah. um, of course, there are cases where it is just an ideation. That means they have mentioned about the intention of the suicide, but they have not acted out on it. So we can see that it actually takes a lot of courage for an individual. There are times where people actually try to commit suicide and they're not able to do it. They fail suicide, right? And when you talk to them, you can see that at that point of time, it was nerve wracking. It was something that demands you to take that courage to actually take your own life. So the last statement would be, yeah, talk therapy and medications work to help prevent suicide. What are your thoughts about it? Is it a fact or is it a myth? So I can see a lot of you all responding, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much to all those of you who are answering. That's right. Okay. So I can see that you all have answered. Um, of course, talk therapy. There is a lot of help and support being given, because when you talk to people who are even thinking through right in their mind, or when there is a situation that is overwhelming, and if there is even that intention that, oh, maybe I should just end my life, there is a lot of research that shows that when you talk to a professional, a mental health professional especially, they feel that there's someone who wants to listen to them. They feel that they are no longer alone. So that connects back to how that sense of loneliness actually has a direct correlation to why they want to commit suicide. Yeah. So thank you so much for all your response. You have been great. So now we're going to be looking the next part of it. We're going to be addressing, actually, before we even look into prevention. I think one of the important things that we want to discuss or focus on would be in terms of risk factors. Yeah. So if you look at it, well, in terms of risk factors, so what are some of the things that can trigger or cause an individual to actually have the intention or to actually um, take their life? And of course, in most cases, it can vary from person to person. But once we are going to be discussing some of the most common factors that is associated with it. And the first one would be in terms of mental disorder. Yeah. So if you look at it, right, you're thinking, mental health disorders, most of the time, for people who are going through mental health disorders, there is a difference in three different areas. So usually the focus would be on the thought process, the emotions that the person is going through, and what are some of their behavior, what are some of the actions, what are their daily routine, the habits that they are doing. So when you look at an individual who has a mental health disorder, usually there is no sync between their thought processes and their behavior, and of course that also affects their emotions. So they're more likely, or that is actually a risk factor. And the next thing would be in terms of alcohol and drug misuse. This is because most people who are going through certain phase in their life, and if they're confronted with challenges or they're going through extreme stress or even depression, they tend to use alcohol and drug as a form of escapism. And usually when there is an overdose, then the tendency to actually carry out the behavior of committing suicide is highly more likely. Yeah. And of course, one of the key factors that I like to highlight is also in terms of loss of grief. So a part of my master's thesis was in grief, and we can see that the minute someone we love, when an individual loses someone they love, right, it is definitely an indication where there is a tendency for the individual to keep thinking more about death. So if you're going on with your daily life, maybe you're not thinking so much about it, but the minute someone we love has passed away, then the tendency to think about it is more. And depending on the relationship and how that whole functionality of the relationship, it can actually cause an individual to start thinking about suicide. So that is definitely a risk factor. Yeah. Of course, we see there are a few more factors, but one of the factors that I would like to highlight on as well, as this point of time, is social isolation. And this is a big issue, because what we notice is that if we look at stats during COVID, like I mentioned earlier, the stats of those who are attempting and committing suicide, especially in Malaysia stats, especially, we can see that there is a drastic increase. And one of the reasons why this has happened is because of that sense of isolation. So we used to have a certain lifestyle where we are constantly in connect with the people that we love, with the people that we are comfortable with, but because of that loss of connection, yeah, and that's when people start to think, or at least have that ideation of wanting to commit suicide. Yeah. So I hope you're all okay and you're doing fine. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. So there are some cases, let me just look through that. Suicidal thoughts will come back to a person after some time of healing, might be in years. And that is right. Thank you, Amy, yeah? Amy Wong. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. So we want to see that. Yeah, I can see that there's a sharing on some of the cases that has happened recently. So let's look at some of the warning factors. But before I go into that, right, maybe to just see how you are all doing so far. What do you think are some of the warning signs when someone maybe has the thought of committing suicide, or even want to actually act on committing suicide? Any thoughts about that? What do you think are some of the warning signs that we need to look into? Withdrawal, yes, thank you for sharing that. Saying goodbye to people, isolating themselves, excellent answers. Um, Thank you. I'm just going to give a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds for those of you who are responding. Start to talk about it, that's right. Yeah. I see isolation, thank you so much. Loss of interest, that's right. Um, Yes, change of behavior in a negative way, that's right. Talking about hoping to get into car incidents, that's right. When they are having that intention that they want to die, or there is ways that they are thinking about death. That's right. Withdrawal symptoms, yeah. Emotional exhaustion, that's right. Buying lots of insurance, okay. Um, and thank you so much to all those of you who have been responding. That's great. Um, we'll just look through it, right? I think one of the most important ways, so I'm just going to address this question. So Christine has asked, right? Sometimes there's no sign. So how do we detect? And I appreciate that question because I think it's very apt in terms of the whole session that we're going through today, right? The purpose of this session is not just for us as individuals to understand more about what goes on in the minds of people who are thinking about suicide or wanting to act on it. I think it works both ways. We as the committee, we also have that part, the role to play. And today, with the number of cases that is increasing, obviously as a committee, we can do so much more in helping to look out for warning factors and also to help in the process of preventing suicide. So, as we are discussing this, right, it may not be something that you would be, hopefully, of course, we don't want you to be facing that situation right now, but these are things that, it can be come handy and you will be shocked. You will not know that when this kind of information is going to help you to see how you can actually go about with someone who's indicated or is showing signs of wanting to commit suicide. So the first thing is that I think most of you, as you were giving me your feedback and you were responding in the chat group, most of you actually got the answers out, and that's great because we're having a discussion. There's no expert in this area. Yeah, I believe that we can all learn from each other's experience, and I thank you for that. So the first thing we see is yes, because when there is an individual who's constantly talking about death or wanting to die or literally talking about suicide, okay, and that is an intention, okay. So making comments about being hopeless, right? Making comments that there's no meaning. One of the main ideas is that they feel that there is no more hope in life. Yeah. And if that is a constant topic that they keep mentioning, then that's definitely a warning sign. Yeah. Increased use of substance abuse, that's definitely a warning sign as well. And I think some of you also mentioned this, and I would like to highlight this, which is basically when they start withdrawing from friends, family, or the community. And this is very much interrelated with the fact that they don't have that sense of meaning. So, why do I need to talk to someone? People are not going to understand. Yeah. So, these are some of the very pertinent warning signs. And then we look at mood changes. So you can see this person sometimes even being extremely happy, and the next moment they are probably very sad. Yeah. Um, what we want to do is to first of all understand these warning signs, and especially if you notice that they're not as excited as they used to be in carrying out the activities, their normal daily activities that they used to. So this could be even like social events, it could be their daily activities. Like they used to be someone who's, if there's a personality change, so they used to be someone who's very chirpy, very bubbly, and suddenly they become quiet, or they start reaching out to people more and hoping for someone to actually listen to them. Yeah, so that is something which you can actually talk about and look out for signs. Okay, so I have a question. How do we actually help an individual who has mentioned that they have the intention of committing suicide? And of course, yes, we can't monitor them 24/7, but I'm going to actually go through some of the preventive measures, and then maybe that will help answer the questions. Yeah. So now we're going to be focusing more in terms of what are some of the um, protective factors for suicide. Yeah. So one of the first things, I think it's just linking back to what we discussed earlier, which is look out for warning signs. So we want to be familiarized. What are some of the warning signs? Maybe as a quiz, can you all remember like any of the warning signs that we just spoke about, maybe you want to just type that out in the chat box. Anything, a one word answer, anything that you remember um, from what I just mentioned earlier in terms of the warning signs. Can I just have you all to just type it out? Thank you, everybody, for your response. So there's isolation, change in behavior, excellent. Withdrawal, that's right. So any warning signs that come to mind? So yes, a lot of y'all mentioned withdrawal, which is true. A change in behavior, they're not acting as how they used to act. Yeah, change in behavior. Any other warning signs that you can remember that we discussed? Depression. So there's a change in personality as well. Talking about it, that's right. Thank you, Leong. Talking about ending our life. Um, no interest in anything, and that is a key warning sign. When they are feeling hopeless, they find that there is no reason to engage in activities, or every time you talk to them they are like, no, it's okay, whatever, I don't really care anymore. When there's silence, yeah, so that is linked with withdrawal as well, when you don't like to do the activities that they once used to do. Okay. Antisocial, yes, hiding, that's right. And antisocial. Thank you so much for all your feedback. So, one of the things, if you look at another way that we can prevent, is actually to provide that safe space for the individual to even talk about it. Yeah, I hope you remember, like earlier when we started doing the activity on fact versus myth, there was a portion that spoke about, do you think talking about it helps? And it definitely helps an individual to at least process their thoughts. Yeah. So one of the ways that you can do it is to actually be direct about it and ask them, like, did you are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about taking your life? And to just process that thought with them. Yeah. And of course, and I think earlier I noticed in the chat someone mentioned about this, how do we take care of ourselves? So when we are in contact with someone who has mentioned, yeah, if they have wanting to commit suicide, and you feel that you're not in a right freedom of mind, or you're not in a right state to support this person, and then one of the best things to do would actually be to seek professional help yourself, or to encourage this person, because there's so much of social stigma still in terms of how we can seek mental health professionals to help in this situation. Yeah. And um, asking questions, of course, one of the things that you want to ask yourself is that you want to ask more open-ended questions. Yeah. Why this is very important with an individual who has indicated that they want to, or at least they have the intention of suicide, is because they feel that nobody cares about them, nobody wants to listen to them. So one of the best things we can do for an individual who's going through so much, the best way for us to actually provide support and care is to just listen to them. So if you want to ask questions, one of the tips that I usually share with clients when I give talks, especially mental health awareness talks, is to ask them more open-ended questions rather than asking yes or no questions, like, are you okay? Then they will just say, yeah, I'm okay. But when you ask them, like, how have you been doing? Then it gives them an opportunity to actually have more conversation. Yeah. So asking questions and being there listening with them, we have a tendency, of course, I can also say that normally in our conversations, I'm also guilty of that. Sometimes one of the biggest distraction is our own phone, like we're having a conversation with someone face to face, but we are on our phone replying messages. So these are things that we don't want to do with someone who's going through these situations, because we really want to show them that we're genuinely there to listen to them. So that's why the fourth part says you need to ask questions and just be able to listen to them. And there's a lot of power in just listening. Yeah. And the fifth one is to help them find reasons to keep going. So an individual who's already thinking of suicide, or they're going through what I call a temporary setback, yeah, very often they have lost that sense of meaning. And if you look at even WHO's definition, we can see one of the factors that they mention when you're talking about mental health is actually if the individual is able to function and stay focused in the goals that they want to achieve. So typically, an individual who is having thoughts about suicide, they are not in that frame of mind to think of a way to find meaning. Like there's a complete shutdown. So if you're close enough to the person, maybe this is something that you can explore, like ask them and encourage them, about maybe some simple goals that they would like to achieve for themselves, and maybe support them and tell them that these are things that they would be able to achieve, and simple ways for them to actually achieve this. Yeah. So I think earlier, if I remember correctly, right, in the chat, there was a question of we can't be there for someone who wants to commit or who has mentioned that they are going to take their life. So, how do we provide care for this person? We can't be there 24/7, and that is true. So, what we want to do is actually, number one, to be able to help them commit to a safety plan. So, what we can do is to tell them that, okay, whenever you have these thought processes, let's see what we can do to ensure you are going to be safe. And very importantly, we want to ask them to write down immediately some of the emergency contact numbers. So if you're comfortable, you can tell them to put your number in as well if it's someone close to you. Otherwise, you need to ask them, who can you reach out to if you have these thoughts coming, and if you want to talk to someone, who can you reach out to? So usually you can give them 2 to 3 numbers. And the other thing is that if they are unable to contact these people, we also want to provide them with information of who they can call in 24/7 hours. And there are many organizations today, including Naluri, which I'll be sharing in a bit, where we do offer support and care line for 24/7. So, these are the relevant information that we can give them. Sometimes just having that someone who maybe they're like, okay, 5 minutes time, I'm going to act on it. But the thought that they can pick up the phone and call and talk to an individual can actually stop that entire process, or at least to reframe the thought patterns, to help them to start think about the whole situation differently, or at least in worst case, they can at least take a pause, um, start breathing, start thinking about other things, and slowly then be able to process that this is not something that they want to really do. Yeah. So so I see a lot of chat taking place. Just for the interest of time, I'm just going to wrap up, and then I can address the questions. Yeah. So remember, of course, the last part is to take care of yourself as well. So no matter what has happened, don't forget that you may not be ready to face the situation. So when someone has indicated that to you, you need to also step back and ask yourself, how are you taking that kind of information? So for some people, they find it extremely overwhelming, especially I can imagine if it's someone very close to you, then you need to ask yourself, you need to like have that kind of awareness or the consciousness that, okay, am I doing okay receiving this information? Do I need to seek help now? Because I don't know if I'm already doing the best that I can. Or sometimes, we have had cases where the loved ones who are hearing this, they feel guilty. They feel that they're not doing enough. What else can we do that is going to help? Yeah. So I this is a very important part, which is the support and the resources. So even if we can't be there for them all the time, but sometimes it's actually providing them that right amount of information so that they are able to actually take action in a more positive direction. And just giving them this piece of information could save their lives. So definitely here we actually have mental health assessment. So if you actually scan through this, you can see that we have a mental health assessment which actually focuses if the person is having depression or anxiety or even burnout. And the good thing about this is that once you have taken the test, as an individual, you can actually opt to speak to one of our mental health coaches. Yeah, they would be able to assist you and process the results of the test that you just took. So like I mentioned earlier, at Naluri, we also have care lines and text lines. So for some individuals, they are okay with just picking up the phone and calling. We have it in different parts. And as you can see the numbers, maybe I'll just encourage you to get a idea of this. And if they're not comfortable to actually call someone, maybe they can at least text an individual. And what I've noticed is that for a lot of individuals who still have the stigma or for whatever reason, maybe the fear of being judged and all, text lines actually work kind of better for them. So they can actually reach out for professional help by just texting and or one of our colleagues in Naluri. Yeah. So we also have one-to-one Naluri consultation. So this is something that individuals both, either if you have ever thought about suicidal thoughts, or if you know of someone who have had suicidal thoughts and you want to talk to a professional about it, you can actually book a one-to-one consultation session. You can just read up on the consultants that we have, and you can just drop them a message and say that you would like to book a one-to-one session, and the team will be able to assist you from there. Yeah. And this is actually how we download our Naluri app. For those of you who are our corporate clients, you can actually get in touch with your HR and see how to go about this process. Okay, that's pretty much it from me for today's session. First of all, I would like to thank you so much for being so participative. I can see that a lot of you all have been taking part in the discussions. You have been chatting with me, and I really appreciate that. Oh, sorry. So I see someone asking me to go back to the QR. Shuhaida, yes, dear. Is this the QR page that you're talking about? I hope I got that right. Um, but yes, in the meantime, thank you so much. And I believe that, like I mentioned in the first part of this session, this talk, the effectiveness and the importance of this talk is really to help us as individuals. Mental health is something that can happen anytime when we feel stress or depression. And I always like to tell people that, physical health, it's easier to take note of, because when you have a flu, you're just running to the doctors. When you have a cough, you know that, okay, I just need to go and get medication and you'll be fine. But with mental health, because of all the stigma that's associated with this, people find it hard to reach out. And I just want to assure you that here in Naluri, you can even just drop a chat with the mental health coaches that we have, and we'll be more than happy to just say hi to you and start the conversation from there. So it's kind of like a ease um, a simpler process for you to get in touch with a mental health professional and see from there how you can actually reach out and help yourself as well as the people that you love. So I want to thank you very much once again. I hope you found this session helpful. I believe that even if it's not now, some of the information that was shared would be something that you can actually pick up and use it in future, or at least reach out to people who actually will need it. So thank you very much for your time. I really hope you had a good session. I wish you a great day ahead, and we're not too far away from the weekend, so I wish you a happy and a meaningful weekend. Thank you so much. So we do have our handouts. For those of you who would like to actually have a copy of the handouts, you can actually pick them up. Um, yes. Please do also drop us a feedback. We would like to know how we can actually improve further. If you found this talk beneficial or helpful, and please feel free to share with us your feedback. We hope that your time with us is useful. We hope that you found the whole session impactful. Thank you. Thank you so much for all your feedback. I appreciate that. So I'm just going to wait for a while for us to actually um, get everyone's feedback, and maybe I'll just look through the questions if there's any questions that I can address. Yeah. So there's someone who asked, what if they are in denial to make a call? I think one of the reasons why they have that issue of denial, when you say denial, is to call a mental health professional, I'm assuming. Then what we can do is actually for to reach out to their support system. So one of the things that we can actually address, or when we are actually having a conversation with them, is to help them identify who are their support system, who are the people that they feel they want to share everything with, and they know that they can trust this person. Usually it's trust and confidentiality. So I think the concern is that whether they trust that person enough, and whether whatever information that they're going to share with this person, is this person going to keep that piece of information confidential. So I think these are the factors that we can take into consideration when we're going to encourage someone to make a call to seek professional help. I hope I've answered your question. So I noticed that some of the questions have already been answered throughout the session. So I really hope that you have been able to find answers. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us at Naluri, and we'll be more than happy to address those questions. So while we're waiting for, I think there are quite a number of them who are still giving your feedback. We really appreciate that. Um, the last thing that I would like to remind you before I end today's session is that we do have a few more upcoming webinars. So please do follow us on the website to be able to have information to what are the webinars. We also have webinars from various languages. So stay tuned for that. And I look forward to seeing you again in our upcoming webinars on sites, or maybe even if you drop me a chat and say hi in the Naluri app. So I wish you all the best. Thank you so much once again, and I hope you found this session beneficial. Thank you.